Good morning. There's a few seats scattered throughout. If you want a seat, if you want to stand, that's fine. If you want to move some seats into the sun, that's fine. We're flexible, Church in the Park. I love it. It gives our team a break, but it also brings us back to our church started in 2020, and so we started outside. We started in backyards, and today brings us back to that. So Allie and I are going to share a short message with us this morning, and then hearkening back to when we started, we'll have a little time for discussion in a couple different small groups that you can just talk about the message for a minute, and then we're going to come back together, and we are going to dedicate 11 kids today, which is incredible. And so we're really excited for that. And then I think we got some ice cream coming to just celebrate at the end. So don't leave early. No. But it's going to be good. And this morning we're going to talk about, continue our message about anxiety, or our series that we're in about anxiety. There is a specific type of anxiety for parents that many parents have. An anxiety for their kids particularly, maybe their safety as they, even just go to school or leave their sight. Anxiety that we have as parents of as the kids get older, like what are they going to do? Anxiety even of, am I doing a good job raising my kids? And I don't feel like I can do a good job raising my kids. And we live fearful and anxious often. But if you have kids, we want to show you some of what to do today with your kids. If you don't have kids, just take a nap this morning. No, just kidding. Even if you don't have kids, all of us have someone in our lives that we're leading. All of us have someone in our lives that we're pouring into. Probably even a kid in our life. If not, you've got some coworkers or you've got some people around you that this will apply to as well. So our guiding two verses for this series are, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. As we are an example even to the world around us, if we want to leave a legacy to the world around us, what better than the peace of Jesus for us? And making a difference with our lives. And one of the biggest ways we can do that, of making a difference, leaving a legacy around us, is with our children. Practically, right, be fruitful and multiply, but also just those people around us in our sphere of influence. So our message today is called, What's Your Legacy? What's your legacy?
And in a few weeks, we get to celebrate the 4-year anniversary of Tekoa Church, which is exciting. We can all clap for that. And our name Tekoa comes from 2 Chronicles 20, where the Israelites were going to go fight a battle. And they turned to God in that. And God says, you don't have to fight. Just worship me and I will provide a victory. So they seek God and he provides that victory for them. And the king during that time that led the people, his name was Jehoshaphat, which is kind of a fun name to say. And he was the one who led the Israelites in this battle. And he guided them in seeking the Lord and in trusting him for their provision. He called the people to fast and to worship God. And a few weeks ago, as I read about Jehoshaphat's life in 2 Chronicles 17, I kept thinking of the importance of legacy, of discipling our children, of how we can impact generations to come because of our faithfulness today and how our family chooses to live today. And that can impact a generation. And so it says in 2 Chronicles 17, in verses 3 through 6, it says, the Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he followed the ways of his father David before him. He sought the God of his father and followed his commands rather than the practices of Israel. His heart was devoted to the ways of the Lord. See, Jehoshaphat was faithful in what his father had taught him and what his ancestors had taught him. David was one of his, I don't know how far down the line, but great-great-great-great-grandfathers. And so that legacy that David left him was something that he was able to follow. And that really drove his life. And we see that, his family wasn't perfect. You read multiple times in Chronicles about how the kings would follow God and then sometimes turn away. And even a chapter before, in chapter 16, it talks about how his own father had made some pretty disappointing choices. However, the Bible calls him good and upright in the eyes of the Lord. And so this is kind of reassuring to me because it reminds me that I don't have to be perfect to lead my kids to follow Jesus, that we're called to set an example, but we don't have to be perfect in that. But we can set that example in how we live out our faith. And I think about, it talks about he followed the ways of his father. And I think about my own kids. What if their lives were that it was said that they followed the ways of their mother, or they followed the ways of their father? Is that something I want them to be following, right? And so you could think about that in your own life. Can you say that about your kids of, if someone were to say, oh, they follow the ways of their mom or dad, what does that life actually look like? Or even a coworker or a neighbor, right? What example are you setting for them? Now, we're going to talk more about this later, but we have about 18 years with our kids, right, from when they're born until graduation, which is 936 weeks. And so that amount of time, like I said, we'll share more later, but that's something that's going to impact them for the rest of their lives, that 18 years. And so that time you lost your temper yesterday, or when you worked late instead of going to your child's game, those are things that are going to stick with them. But tomorrow is a new day and a new time that you can set an example for them. But don't wait too long, because before you know it, those 936 weeks are going to be over. And in the same way, maybe it's a coworker or a friend or a neighbor, right? You don't know when that person's going to change jobs or maybe move somewhere else, but you can make an impact with the days and the weeks that you have with them now.
The other thing I want to point out about this situation, and I'm not going to read all the verses because we don't need to this morning, is that Asa was Jehoshaphat's father, and he set an example for Jehoshaphat's life. But this was in stark contrast to even just their neighbors, not that many miles away. And they were following God, and then their neighbors who were supposed to be following God weren't. And they ended up in very different places. And I want to encourage you that you can leave a legacy of impact for your kids. And often, it's challenging. Your kids might even fight and rebel a little bit about, I want to do this. My friends at school are doing this. Or I want to go do this thing. Why do we have to go to church? And some weeks they want to go to church and some weeks they don't. Or they want to go do this thing. And hey, we live differently. Our kids are only 5 and 2. And there's already times where, our family doesn't do what somebody else's family does, because we live differently in our lives. But because of that, the legacy we get to live for our kids is so different. And I think what a gift for our kids, especially learning to just trust God and how different that can be for them. We've been talking about anxiety in this series, and it's something that everybody faces to some extent. Some of us struggle more than others. I started with this statistic in this series that over half of, I think it's Gen Z, is clinically diagnosed with some form of anxiety, which is a crazy statistic. And I think about what legacy can we leave for our kids. Like, we have 2 daughters, and the younger generations are facing this more and more. And so statistically, at least one of them should suffer from this. But what a different legacy I think we can leave as we raise them up. Yes, we feel a little anxiety, but it's not something that's debilitating and suffering for us, because we are learning to trust God in those different things, that they will have the ability to be steadfast and filled with faith and love and generous, to be world changers, to see God moving through their lives because of the legacy we get to leave by bringing them up in God and knowing and experiencing Him, that they get to live and lead a better life even than us because of the faith that we're getting to raise them up in.
And Jehoshaphat had wisdom in who he listened to, and I think that's so important, especially when we think of anxiety, right? Where are we turning when we come with those anxious moments? Are we turning to God? Are we turning to social media? What kind of friends are we turning to? And so he didn't listen to the culture or what others would tell him was what he should be doing, but he continually inquired of the Lord. It says in 2 Chronicles 23, verse 3, it says, he inquired of the Lord and declared a fast. And he didn't want to go out in his own wisdom. He knew, okay, I have these battles that are coming, these real battles that I have to fight, but I don't want to do this on my own. I want to seek God in that. And so even when others told him that the enemy was coming, even when he was told, you're going to lose, like this isn't looking good, destruction looked like it was going to come, yet he continued to trust in God, and he stood firm in what he'd been taught and trusted in that.
Try my mic.
Is that not working?
I don't know what's going on.
Okay, it could be me. And so an example of this, even in our own family, is that we prayed for Hannah's school situation. So the last couple years, we've been really seeking God and where she was supposed to go to school. And Austin and I speak Spanish and really wanted her to have the opportunity to go to a dual immersion school. And so last year, she was going into transitional kindergarten. We applied for a program. We said, okay, we're praying. We're believing that God is going to open the door. And he didn't. He didn't open the door. She didn't get in. And we had to really trust God as a family in that of, okay, God has another plan for her this year. And it ended up being a great year, and we're grateful that God didn't open that door in hindsight because of the opportunity that she had. But we continue to walk as a family through that and even share with her, in kid language of what we were trusting God for and praying for. And then this year we had the opportunity to apply again. So we believed in faith. Okay, we're going to do it. We're going to apply for kindergarten. And she didn't get in, but she got on the wait list. And then a couple weeks later, I got a call that she did get in. And so it was something that we were able to celebrate with her. Like, we trusted God, we prayed, and maybe the outcome would have been different, and we would have had to continue to trust God as a family. So whether or not He answers the prayer, our job is to continue to trust Him. But this was just a great opportunity for us to really seek God's wisdom in the situation, and then to be able to celebrate together as we saw God provide. And isn't that the prayer that all of us want for our kids, all of us even want for ourselves? Because we're going to face trials. There's going to be times where we don't get that opportunity that we wanted, but where are we going to be in that time? Are we going to stand boldly? Are we going to stand firm in our faith with confidence and trust God and remember what we've been taught? Or are we going to turn to something else in that time? And so we need to be reminded of the faithfulness that we've seen in the past and trust that for God's provision in the future. And being present with your child week after week, living out that faith, is the most important thing that you can do as a parent. And this isn't something that happens randomly or by chance. That's the consistent presence is what's going to make an impact. Showing up for your coworker, being there to listen every week, that's what's going to make an impact. Talking to a neighbor or helping them year after year after year, that's what's going to make that impact in their life. And with our kids, we might not teach them some revolutionary lesson every week or help them develop a new talent or a new skill. And you may not even get to shower every day this week. That's okay. But the one thing that you can do is to be present with your kids no matter what is going on around you. And so I want you to think about, I said before, we have about 936 weeks with our kids. And this is not 936 marbles, but there's 6 jars of marbles on that table over there. So about all 6 of those would be 936. And so we have that amount of weeks with our kids from birth until high school graduation. And so think about those marbles in a jar. And with each week that goes by, you take 1 marble out. And so I've seen some people actually do this. They have their jar of marbles at home, and each week they take out a marble, and that reminds them, I only have this many weeks left with my kids, and so I really want to make a difference in the time that I have with them. So if you have kids, you can try to do the math. So based on their age, how many marbles would there be left in the jar? So we have 11 kids getting dedicated today, and I'm not going to read all the weeks that are left. They're on the bags that are back there. But if you think about it, so our youngest child getting dedicated is Baltazar. So his family has 868 weeks until graduation. Our oldest child getting dedicated today is Lucero. Her family has 289 weeks until graduation. So you think about that, right? Every week we're using up a marble, and so we only have a certain number of weeks left with them. And can you believe that you've already lost some marbles, right? We've already lost some. But the jar really illustrates the principle that when you see how much time you have left, you tend to do more with the time that you have now. So just be there with your child this week, because sometimes being dependable is more important than doing something remarkable. And the same is true in our workplace. Being dependable for your boss, being somebody who's going to be there consistently, who's going to do work with integrity, or somebody who's going to be there to help your neighbor or your coworkers or a friend who they know that when a hard situation comes, they can turn to you. That's what's going to make an impact. So if you've simply been there this week for your child or a friend or a neighbor, you've accomplished something far greater than you could ever measure. I know we often joke in our family that I try too hard because I try to plan all these like grand adventures and do all these crafts and like different activities and all these things. And my girls like it. It's fun. But they're also just as happy for daddy to come home and they call it play silly with daddy, like throw them on the couch and wrestle with them and tickle them. And so sometimes as parents, I think we try to overcomplicate it, right? And I'm not saying doing all the big adventures, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's our presence that matters. That's what is most important. And so that's what we really want to remember as we raise our kids. And so with each marble or week that slips by, there are opportunities to demonstrate the one thing that every kid needs, which is your presence and your love for them. And how we love our kids is going to impact the rest of their lives. So you get a chance every day, every week, to prove to your child over and over again that you love them by the words that you say, the people you invite into their lives, the stories you tell them, and the games that you play. Love is the most important thing that you can give any child. And one reason that parenting is so wonderful is that you are the strategically positioned, the person who's most strategically positioned to really make that impact in your child's life, to show them the love of Jesus and to show them what it looks like to live a life of faith. Whatever qualities you're praying for your child to develop, remember that you have the potential to be their best teacher. The best person to influence your child's future is you. So between now and your child learning how to drive, graduation from high school, going to prom, getting married, the single most important influence in their life is you.
So today, in a few minutes, we're going to get to dedicate these kids. And I love it because even if you don't have a child dedicated today, you are a part of our church and you're a part of this. And something that I love that at least at our size right now, we get to make child dedication a part of our services because the kids are really integral to our church and so important. And it's okay that some of them are running around a little bit and not fully, paying attention, because as they grow older, they will be able to be. And even at this age, they're getting to absorb of, oh, my parents are here. Oh, there's worship going on. People sing to God. Oh, this is happening. They get to absorb a lot of that. And Moses, to the Israelites, before he sent them off, he had everybody gathered, old, young, parents, everybody. And he said these words, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children and shall talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Basically, these should be all through your life. Just live your life with these as a part of your life, and these are what your kids are going to notice and see and become a part of their faith. So this is really what it looks like, just living your life, seeking more and seeking God. And you don't have to be perfect yet. Don't worry. Maybe you're still checking out church. Maybe you just started following Jesus. Maybe you've been following him a long time and you feel like I have so far to go still in my faith journey. But are you, the fact that you're seeking him, the fact that you're here today is you setting an example and helping start to leave a legacy for your kids. So I want to talk about, as we come towards the end here, just to wrap up a little bit of, hey, what does that look like? What is your role for your kids?
Yeah, so we really want to be wise ourselves so that we can help them walk in wisdom. And we talked about that earlier with Jehoshaphat, how he didn't follow culture, he followed the wisdom of God. And so we really want to give our kids that good biblical advice and speak of God's faithfulness in your own life. So one of our values as a church is that we are storytellers. And so do that in your own family as well. Where did you see God show up this week? Where did you see him in a conversation at work or something going on with a family member or a health situation? But really sharing those stories of testimony with our kids is super powerful and something I think they'll continue to remember as they get older, of areas that we can identify God working in our lives. And then show them and include them in your faith journey. So where are things at with you? It doesn't always have to look good, right? You can be honest with your kids as well. But really just showing them, hey, God is continue to be with us, even if we're walking through a difficult situation, that God is there with us and we can trust in him. And so whether you have kids or not, there's people that you are influencing in your circle of influence and really just making an impact in their life. And so today we get to dedicate 11 kids, which is the most that we've ever dedicated at once, which is exciting. And part of this is a commitment from our church that we as a church are committing to help point these kids to Jesus, to help share the love of God with them, and to introduce them to who Jesus is. And so one thing that we want to just share is that last week we had 25 kids in Tekoa Kids. So our kids ministry is definitely growing, which is amazing. God is moving in our kids, and we've heard from countless families that they're coming to church because of their kids and because of the excitement that they have of learning about God. But we need more kids leaders and volunteers. So if you are here today and you are interested, let me know because the size of our church hasn't caught up with the size of our kids. And it's a huge blessing. But consider serving even just once a month and being an example to the kids. And like we've already said, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be consistent and show up, seeking God in your own life. And if you're anxious or fearful in serving, that's okay. We'll be there to help you. You can still be an example. By you taking that step, even of going with anxiety of like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to be here, that is a testimony to the kids as well. And, I have one leader who will tell me all the time, like, I don't know what I'm doing to really make a difference. I don't feel like I'm doing much. I'm just showing up with the kids. But that is, in and of itself, a huge difference. And so I'm always trying to encourage her and remind her of just the impact that she's making and the difference she's making in the lives of the kids each week as she's serving.
Awesome. So as we're going to leave you with something, and actually we're going to let you just discuss this for a minute in groups of 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want. But I want to encourage you to just think of one thing. So this week I wrote down, and Ellie and I are going to share this together, 10 things of my faith and living out my faith that I want to kind of pass on to my kids. So I'm going to read 10 of these. If you want the list, it's on our homepage. There's the link there. And it's listed on the notes page, all 10, if you want to be able to like look at it, if you're that kind of person. We have 10, and the point of 10 is that I think all of you can identify with one of these of, hey, this is an area I could grow in. And as I grow in this, I can be intentional about growing with my kids in this. Don't take all 10. Don't be like, I'm going to grow in all of these over the next month. You're going to grow in none if you do that. So honestly, if you really bold, maybe 2 of these, to just, hey, this resonates. I would love to make an improvement in my faith journey in this area. And then talk about it with my kids. I love what Allie said. You don't have to be perfect. Matter of fact, when you're not perfect and you let your kids into that, I think that's even more impactful to their faith journey of like, I didn't do what I wanted to do, but I'm still seeking God. That is one of the most important lessons you can teach your kids, that you don't need to be perfect and that we can grow in that, and it's okay that we're still growing. So these 10 things are, number 1, attending church on Sundays, right? That's a good first step for so many of us of this is going to be a commitment to me. And I know so many people, I hear this, and the people in our church that even told me stories of, I made a sacrifice at my work, and my work didn't like it, that I said I got to be to church on Sundays. And I didn't take that job because I had to work on Sundays. Or kids of, hey, we didn't go do that sports thing because I needed to be there on Sundays. And those families, let me tell you, those families are healthier and happier in their lives than the ones that are doing all of the things.
The second thing you can do is be part of Christian community and groups. So we have our groups that are starting in just a couple weeks, and so we'll be sharing more information about that. But if you've never joined a Tekoa group before, I really encourage you to dive in and be a part of that. It's a great way to get to know other believers and to live out our value of not doing life alone, that we want to live life together because that's how we're going to be able to encourage each other in our faith and really grow in community with one another.
Slowly making the way through the intersection. We'll let them go by here because it's just, all of the kids too are just like, okay, we'll watch. All right. Yeah, I think community is so important. A dad was even telling me, like I said, letting your kids in. A dad was telling me a couple weeks ago of how this summer we did a bunch of guys hangouts, and he was able to pass on then to his son who's in a new context, in a new school, and trying to figure out making friends of, hey, this is what I've been doing to seek community, and it's so important that you don't just stay isolated, and community is so valuable. So, second, community. 3, serving in the church. It's so important that we're doing something, giving back with our lives. And last week, my 2.5-year-old was helping me tear down in the auditorium. She was helping me crank down the speaker stands and like push a case. Yes, it would have been faster without her, but it was more important that she was with me because I'm passing on to her the joy and the value and the importance of serving and giving back, and she loved it. She had such a good time.
The fourth thing that you can do is worship, and our family does worship night every Wednesday night, and it's usually very chaotic. Usually it's us trying to like wrangle everybody together, and it's something that can be noisy and crazy, but it's something that our family does consistently, and it's something that our kids look forward to, that we get to worship God together, and we're helping them develop that habit now, that again, it doesn't have to look perfect, but it's something that we're doing consistently to help them even just learn, okay, this is how we worship God, and it could be something fun that we do as a family.
Number 5 is praying. We just simple things. Like we have our kids, sometimes it's so hard, just say thank you for one thing from your day. And just learning to talk to God and be thankful in their journey of God. But how do you include kids in your prayer life?
The 6th thing is gratitude. So that's something I think really like that we all need this, to be grateful, to be reminded of, okay, I'm not going to complain or get angry or talk about how anxious I am, but we want to pass on to them that idea of gratitude. It doesn't mean you have to be fake with your kids. Be honest about what you're feeling, but in that, show them that you can still be grateful. And I know my kids need this, so think about I'm sure we've all been there with kids, right? The one of them's like complaining they got the smaller piece of cake, and I'm like, be grateful that you got cake, right? Like, are we grateful that we got cake at all, or are we just trying to look at that somebody else got something better in our lives? But really helping them to learn that idea of gratitude and that being a part of who they are as a person.
Number 7 is just reading the Bible. And I love Allie actually does a great job with our kids. She reads their little kids' Bible even, and just a short story. It's like 60 seconds to 2 minutes of a story just at breakfast time every morning, and just building that habit in of breakfast, or even just sitting on the couch and the girls are going to look through the pictures while she reads her Bible, or I do for a few minutes.
Number 8 is generosity. And so we want to talk about how we're being generous in our lives, both with our time, our finances. How are we giving to others as a family? So if there's somebody who's sick, maybe you take them a meal, or maybe somebody, just got a new job or had a baby and you're making them cards to take over. This is something that we're teaching our kids now, that they can make a difference and they can be generous with what they have. Even talking to your kids about finances and about tithing, right? And that might look different depending on their age, but letting them know now that we give back some of our money to God, because in reality, it's all his money. And so we want to be good stewards of what he's given us and give back, because we're so grateful for what he's given to us.
Number 9 is just becoming more like Jesus, his character, fruit in our lives. And, are you becoming more patient, kind, loving? Again, just bring your kids into this of, hey, I'm working on being more patient. And I mean, working on being more patient with you. And encouraging your kids, hey, how are you becoming more loving like Jesus, or generous like Jesus? And just talking with our kids about that and seeking to do that as well.
And the last one is blessing our kids, speaking life over them and love over them. And this is something that we try to do with our girls, that we're speaking blessing over their lives. And so I say something over them every night. I tell them that you are loved, you are chosen, you are daughters of a king, and God has great plans for your life. And so it doesn't have to be, you don't have to say the same thing that I do, but just speaking that blessing over them is super powerful for our kids as they continue to grow over time.
So there's 10 things, and I want to encourage you, hey, what is one of those? Like, I have growth area in those, so I know you do too. So what is one of those over the next week or two even, hey, I want to focus on this and focus on bringing that into our kids. So we're going to give you, just a couple minutes and encourage you, find somebody next to you, find a couple people next to you. Just talk about this. Hey, what's the one of these things that I'm going to look at, and how am I going to include that in my life? And then we're going to come back together and we're going to pray over, bring the kids up, and we're going to dedicate them all together. But if you need the list, it's on the website. But yeah, what is one of these or two of these areas that I'm going to seek on growing in this area? And how can I even pass that on to somebody else? What does it look like for me to live that out over the next couple weeks? So take a couple minutes and then we'll gather back together.